It took me a minute. Hello, everybody, and welcome to NycosRPG. Today is Friday, and we are going to be talking about a subject that is, I think, one of the greatest mysteries of role playing games. And quite frankly, until I started developing the NycosRPG system, I hadn't really even considered the angles on this. But as we look into the very concept of role playing, one of the biggest mysteries of role playing is the very concept of leveling up. So today's episode subtitle is Achievement Unlocked: The Costs of Leveling Up. And I know that sounds kind of strong to say costs of, but I think you'll see why as we go along. The excitement of a role play game is in the progression of a story and the development of your character. Now, I do need to mention that with me on the air right now are two of the absolute advocates for the show, Abletop, whom you've met before, whose name is Scott, and then also Gene. And I've got your current title as Valkyrie. Did you have a particular name you want to be known as to our community here online, Gene?
Mary. I'll change it.
Well, they're not looking at it anyway.
Okay,
And I'm not going to be putting you guys' images up on the screen or anything for today
that's okay.
until later in the show. And I've got a lot of stuff to cover, so we won't be doing a lot of interaction. But if something I say really does catch either one of yours attention and you feel really strongly, shout out or Scott, make one of your distinct noises, and we will we will translate for the audience what you meant and move forward from there. So this concept of achievement unlocked, I want to set the stage for you as viewers. If you've not played a role play game, imagine you have spent the last 6 weeks on a project at work, and it's been very important for your company, and the careers of many people are on the line, and you have to develop the use of, let's say, your Excel skills in ways you haven't used them before, but the company is depending on you to accomplish doing a certain formatted document, and it was really stressful. But when you finally get done and you walk into your boss's office, he says, "Congratulations, you get to level up. Go ahead and change your stats and be ready for our next mission." That's not how the world works. And so when we talk about role playing and the process of advancement, we are actually looking at it kind of askew in reference to the persona. And today we're going to be talking about the development of the persona within the game, the character that you're playing in the game, and what the advancement process might look like to them. So before we do that, I do want to mention that Nycos RPG is a role-playing mechanism that I've devised that is a saddle for other systems and really tries to work to resolve the challenges that have been in role-play games for a long time. Nycos is not your clumsy old system, but instead is a new way to look at role-play. We'll talk about that more later, but for more information, you can check out NycosRPG.com. All right, now getting back to this, the idea of leveling up. Gene has. I'm going to go ahead. I was going to keep you guys out of the show, doggone it, but I'm going to have to ask Gene or Scott. Have either one of you in real life ever received a level up?
Oh,
No, because leveling up in this concept doesn't actually exist. And I freely admit that.
Okay. Okay.
well, okay. Yes, I did.
Gene
In
received a level up. When did you receive your level up, Gene?
oh, come on!
We're
I
waiting
played
for the
D and
story.
D. I played D&D from book one, the first series, and I played advanced D&D and second edition and third edition and 3.5, and I skipped four and I played 5e.
But
And you
when?
get so
But
far, they say now it's level up. You've learned everything that you just
no,
didn't know you
you
a
misunderstood.
moment ago.
Yeah,
And
misunderstood the question, Gene. When did you, as a human being, receive your level up?
oh, Never.
Yes, I get that you understand how level ups work in role play games. What I was asking is it in any way similar to reality? Do you ever
No.
have somebody walk
Nope.
up to you and say, "I'm the storyteller. You are my role playing character in the story, and I'm granting you the ability to level up. So go ahead and add some extra skills, maybe add a feat or two." Maybe even if in the case of Dungeons and Dragons, go ahead and increase your strength by one. Go ahead. That's
Um,
fine.
um,
That's
um, well, if
no,
No.
that,
it
If
doesn't
that,
work that
yeah,
way.
no, in no way is that
So,
life or
so
anywhere near life.
the challenge becomes when you're playing a role play game for the first time, and the game master says, "Well, congratulations, we finished the first mission. Go ahead and do the level ups for your character. You've leveled up in your class."
well,
What does that look like?
You add points to your character so you're better at doing things.
But right.
But it,
but
but but then you also can't learn the skills you want to because they're in some other class and you can't learn those. So it's not real. It's not real at all.
Well, and to the point in particular I was referring to is that when that happens, the persona has to be thinking, how
Online,
does
non.
that happen?
We
What is
discussed the
the
role playing game
mechanism by which
and how
that level
leveling
up
up is
occurs?
just so arbitrary and unreal.
the the mechanism that most RPGs use is experience points.
Right.
But again, that's
But no,
arbitrary.
that's actually the point. Is if you
So
what I put up on the screen is we're asking the
and
question
having
how.
restricted skills that would cost you twice as much to learn them are is an arbitrary.
Okay,
Yeah, Gene, you can't talk over me.
People,
I'm trying to broadcast here, so
I
I will call on you and you can give your opinion. But
I
yes, but when you have a game that allows you to develop skills,
I
and
need to
well,
come
she's
to
talking to
that
somebody else, isn't she?
I have, okay, I have a character, sure, ranger,
Yeah,
scout.
she's not talking
close
to us.
until
So,
okay.
okay, this is a nightmare I didn't expect to have happen. I'm gonna have to mute her for a minute because I can't
She
have
had no
that.
signature, no
Okay,
sailing, no, so she can start learning.
I am
Been by a
Okay,
treatise, so she can read those treatises.
actually looking.
there, I've muted her. All right, I know she's having a conversation with her roommate, and he's also a role player, so I'm sure that's leading to some fun conversations at that end. But yes, you're right. The issue is that the average way is that the game master determines that experience has been earned and then grants the players at a staccato moment, a particular moment, okay, advance yourself. But my question is, how does that
So one
manifest for the
freaking
persona, the character in the game? How does he? Is it like in the a video game where there's this fuzzy little light that spins around him and his health goes back up and his hit points go up and his armor improves and his gear gets a modifier?
so I want to look at that. No.
Are you talking with me, Scott? Or are you talking to
I
yourself? Scott? Scott, can you hear me? Oh dear.
so
Oh dear. What happened? Can you hear me, Scott?
yeah.
Okay.
Now I can.
Okay. A second ago, you were, yeah, I was hearing you and I was hearing Jean, but I had to mute Jean because she was talking over us. So hopefully she's done by now. Sorry about that, Jean. You were actually talking with Scott, I think, and we overheard you. So
Okay,
you got to
my
raise your microphone.
apologies. I forgot to mute.
Yeah. So sorry about that. But the point I was making is that when you are leveling up a character, what is it manifesting like for the persona? In Dungeons and Dragons, you get a arbitrary instruction by your game master. Okay, you've leveled up. You can go ahead and do your level up mechanism. what does that manifest like for the persona?
It,
If
I admit that it generally doesn't,
right,
because
normally we just shine it, and it's just something that happened to the persona in game, and so we add the numbers and we modify it and we proceed on with the story. But I always wonder what that would look like from the player's standpoint. You know, he's walking down the street one afternoon after killing a monster, and all of a sudden he gets this weird feeling in his stomach, and the light starts swirling around him, and he gets lifted off the ground, and his hit point little counter goes ding 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 as he gains more hit points, and his armor goes ding ding because he's got improved armor because of his skills. And I just, it cracks me up when I think about that, because there's nothing in that that would feel natural to a persona. The character in the game can't, because it's being done at an arbitrary point. The closest, I suppose, and I know that there are game masters who do somewhat honor this, where they'll say, well, in order for you to have earned that experience, you now have to go and spend a couple of months back in your home country, your hometown, and practice on the things you learned and consider and therefore they play it out over a forced perspective amount of time. But that way, the player, when he comes back to the experience, doesn't have to explain those modifiers. But to me, the biggest challenges with that is, how does that happen if they've, for example, achieved a level where they've gained a feat? In role-play games, as classically defined, you gain extra attributes, extra abilities, whenever you advance far enough down the advancement line. And where did that come from? It seems that it spawned out of nothingness, and especially with the rules as written, the game master doesn't have any real control over what skills or feats that a player chooses, within the limits of saying they can disallow it for their campaign or whatever. But for the most part, game masters pretty much have to suck it up, buttercup, if a game player wants to add a new feat from another source. And to me, that just feels contrived. It doesn't feel natural. Add to that the fact that, as we've talked about it before, if you're talking about a level up, an advancement within your class, the class limitations preclude you from learning certain skills. If you are a person who takes on the role of a priest in a roleplay game, the priestly classes are limited in which weapons they can use, which kinds of armor they can use, which kinds of magic they can use. And to me, it feels arbitrary, but it's bounded by these limitations they call classes. Now, to me, the biggest dishonor to the advancement of a persona or advancement of an individual in a world setting is the telling them they can't learn something that they want to learn. And it seems like a challenge. And if you were, for example, Gene, in a situation and you had a class, but you wanted to, say, learn to read a foreign language, if the system didn't have a mechanism for adding new skills, what would you do with that?
Not get it?
Pretty much, right? The storyteller says, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
There is, like in D&D 2, you don't even get credit for a higher intelligence to get more languages. You're just stuck with, what, 2 languages? And there's no capacity. You can't take linguistics.
Right,
you can't gain more languages. You just stay as stupid as you were all your life. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, see, you get wound up, Gene. I imagine that. Scott was going to say something there in between there, though. Go ahead,
Sorry.
Scott.
I mean, my thing about that is, and this is something I noticed, language since Gene brought that up as the example he was using, thing about it is language is mostly ignored because of this little thing called common tongue.
Yes, unless you're sailing south of Selk, right, Scott?
Yes, and
No,
And
that.
we can't. We haven't been able to understand anybody yet.
But I think a better point is that when we talk about skill restrictions, there are a lot more that are more blatant. So, for example, a rogue cannot pick up and use polearms. There's no mechanism for them to learn how to use a polearm within the class of a rogue. Now, that may have changed. Is that true still in Pathfinder?
I'd have to. I think in Pathfinder 1 it is still true, but I'm not sure about second edition.
Well, I do know that the restrictions they put upon a class about what skills they could learn was a major barrier to playing the character you wanted to play. You were limited to restricting your skills advances to the skills that were available to your class, which led to the concept of
Multi-classing.
the multi-class, the way they currently do multi-class, which is steal a level from your maximum advancement, because your character as a persona can only have 20 levels, and so if you take a level of rogue in order to pick up that skill, then you can't ever make your warrior up to the maximum level. He's going to
Well,
be
that I
restricted.
will not defend. I've always felt like multi-classing is dumb,
Oh, now
and
Scott,
I will.
I
Only if you want to get to level 20. But if you want to build a different type of character where you need to get cross classing so you can build the character you want.
okay, but
I
see,
always kind of like the Ranger Rogue mix.
but
But and
the challenge. I have to stop you for a second, Gene. The concept of multi class characters has been problematic going all the way to first edition,
yeah,
because when you were for example, a fighter magic user, which was very popular at the beginning, a fighter magic user was getting the best of both worlds, the biggest weapons ranging as far as what kinds of weapons you could pick up, and magic use. And because the fighter magic user had hit points that were averaged from that higher dice, they would be more survivable than a standard wizard. But the challenge with any of it is that the very concept of class limits is where the ludicrous comes in, because there's the only reason for manifesting the character class mechanism is to feed the experience point mechanism. You want to provide experience points to someone commensurate to the amount of effort they put into the combat scene. So the concept is therefore a rogue who is going to be contributing far less to the combat scene should take less experience to gain up in levels, because they're not going to get the opportunities that the frontline warrior would. And that's been lost. That complete concept has been just completely destroyed, because what it meant in the old days is that your rogue would be much higher level in the same amount of experience points as your wizard or your fighter, because he gained experience so much faster and gained levels so much faster, so that
Yep.
the challenge is that because of that, therefore, your party adventuring theme was going to be much more rogue focused, which led to a lot more of the concepts of being a robber band and all of the problems that came from that. But the very concept of break into a structure, go into the lower layers, open all the doors, kick down the doors, kill the monsters, and grab their treasure, was predicated on that experience point mechanism, so that what was getting rewarded was what was expected from the players. And arguably, because most players really originally, at least initially, really dug the combat mechanism, they wanted to get into the fights. They wanted to get into the brawling, and therefore experience points gets tied to killing, and the experience point killing ratio then skews everything else down the road. But the challenge again that we're really talking about though is the point of achieving your goals and unlocking a new achievement and therefore gaining that level up. So when we talk about the level up, there's some other things we have to worry about, is that it also diminishes your integration. The farther up you go in levels, in theory at least, your social standing within that same group goes up as well. So if you are a warrior with 8 or 10 levels of in your class, you're going to be held in higher esteem within the culture that is warrior based. And therefore, as you go up in higher levels, you can actually diminish your integration ability because you went wide, picked up extra skills that took you out of that environment and put you into, say, a less savory one. So you're having to make the choice, and I think it's kind of a false choice, about where you wanted to go to progress your persona. It also adds additional delays in advancement, because once you pick a class to level up in, at least according to modern Dungeons and Dragons rules, you have to grind however many experience points it takes to get to that next level, no matter which class you grabbed. So let's say you were arguably going from a warrior class, which is pretty specialized. You've got several martial arts styles and such built into it. But when you switch to a rogue class, the skills pool greatly diminishes. The needs for new awarenesses goes down, but you still have to grind the same number of experience to move that class up. And all of that leads to the monotonous style of grinding that now Dungeons & Dragons is famous for, the fight scenes that take 3 hours. So when we talk about the concept again of advancing or leveling up, let me get back to my page here. Beyond having to explain the experience, why choose the level? Why choose the class that you're choosing when you advance? And how does that manifest? You've got a character who's been playing as a fighter for 3 levels. You just finished killing off a dragon. Game Master says, okay, you have to level up. You choose Druid. Why? Where did that come from? Well, I've got a kit build that I want to go to, and it needs to have skills from the Druid class.
Yes.
But why? What in this persona's life, in their existence? You walked him out of a fight scene as a warrior, a victorious warrior, and now you say, okay, we're going to go pick up some skills in picking berries and drying fruit, doing prayers to the woodland beings. How can that happen? If you are inhabiting the role, if you are the persona, if you're not you, if you're the actual person that's actually in the role and you've just killed the monster, what is possessing you to go and do that other thing, to pick up that other level?
If I may interject.
Absolutely, go ahead, Scott.
I cannot speak for all druids, and I don't intend to, but maybe the killing of that dragon was too traumatic for the persona, and they are thinking, maybe I should settle down and do something.
Okay, so you notice what you did there was actually very, very critical. You inhabited the role. You stepped down into the seat and said, what could possess him to do this? He killed a monster, and that was terrifying, and he doesn't want to do that anymore, so he wants to go find out about how to become friends with nature. So, yeah, okay, that is a rational process. But players don't do that with their characters today. They just simply...
I know!
So, Gene, when you mentioned earlier that sometimes they have to get skills from another class. What did you mean by that?
Okay. Um, I like a ranger, but there's a lot of things it couldn't do. So sometimes I started playing a ranger rogue and liked it. Well, I think it was in 3.0 that they actually came out with the scout, which was a combination of ranger rogue. Not all ranger, not all rogue, but it was a smooth progression, and I didn't lose that level 20. I had a combined character, almost like a simultaneous character or a gestalt character,
So
but not with all the
yes,
perks,
okay,
but
but
with
hang on,
enough of them
hang
to
on,
keep the
hang on.
flavor.
What that tells me though is that the designers of the game master that you had provided you an out to get what you wanted without having to break the rules. The fact that the scout existed.
Well, no, the scout actually existed in the book. It was
But was it?
canon.
But my point is that it's a weather change, a rules change that
Oh,
gave
yeah.
that ability. It was not. It wasn't your character building its own path to get there. It was a rule system condescending to the demands of the players who wanted that combination. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I
And
agree. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah.
well, this is problematic because they can't and don't cover all possible options. They can't. There are too many infinite styles. I know that I noticed that in the materials that came out for 5e, Dungeons and Dragons 5e, many times they would create, well, like for example, in the player's handbook, you have the warrior, but in that warrior group of subclasses, they have the arcane knight. What is that? That is a fighter magic user.
Yes.
But now it's defined so he can follow the warrior path all the way to 20th and still be that multi-class. Same thing with arcane trickster, same thing with, name subclass here. My point is that those are all stopgap fixes to try to patch over the big challenge, which is that character progression is not in the hands of the player, but in the hands of the game master, who tells them when they can and can't advance.
Can I say it? Which is why I play Nycos.
Oh, I think you'll say that a bunch of times, and Scott would be the one that pulls back and says, "Wait, it's cool and all that, but you still want to acknowledge that the other systems are out there." And
Oh, I acknowledge it,
yeah,
and they certainly have given it. Um, it's just like the restrictions of who you can be as a character are removed.
But okay, yes, they are removed. But for me, and this is why I honestly, okay, I'm getting into a whole mental bag of worms, which may be a different episode altogether. But my point is, they are removed. But for someone like me, that almost presents too many options.
okay. So and I get what you're saying, and yes, there may be a question in that answer, so there may be another episode completely on it. But I think the short version of that is that Dungeons and Dragons, going all the way back to when I started 50 years ago, created the class mechanisms for its own purpose because it was trying to define the primary roles in a group. They were, nowadays we use completely different terms because the video games market has honed this down to a sharp point in that you have your tank, you have your DPS, you have your
Magic user, your cleric, and some other support.
No, it's not even that.
No, Gene, we're talking about just the mechanics. You have the tank, who is the person that has to soak the damage. He has to be able to absorb all the damage that is being thrown at the party by himself. Then
you have
secondary role is DPS, and that's the person with a short range weapon or a missile weapon that is just pouring the damage on the opponent at a rapid fire rate. Then there's the healer, which is also known as the buff debuff, and that's basically giving the players all the advantages and taking away all the monsters' disadvantages. And then finally, beyond that, you have your all-in-one or your hunter, and basically they have to fill all the other gaps. But that 4-person group was what Dungeons & Dragons was trying to define way back when, with the warrior, rogue, wizard, cleric.
Yep.
And the thing that I find fascinating is that the concept of that adventuring group going all the way back to that past, as we talked about before, were also representative of the 4 types of units in a military if you were playing with entire units. So you would have your assault troops, which are your frontline troops. You'd have your infantry, which are your mobile troops. Then you have your artillery, which are your damage dealing buff, and then you've got your support units, which are your buff debuff. They're parallels to each other, and it was the same thing back then as it was in Dungeons and Dragons and is in the modern experience. And I think that's where, when we say Nykos diverges, Nykos says instead, no, we're a group of friends. We're a group of adventurers. We have a pile of skills, but we don't have anybody who is specifically assigned the task of taking all the damage or dealing all the damage or repairing all the damage. Everybody can take a few of the skills that would allow them to fill those support roles so that it feels more natural, because we don't fight in organized units like that any longer. That was World War II, and we haven't had our military set up like that, and even individuals never operated with a hit point pool. You can't point to anywhere on the body and say, that's where your hit point pool is, go for that, right? So
Yeah.
So the difference between systems, between the what I'm calling the classic RPG mechanism and the Nykos mechanism, is really comes down to planning the progress of your persona's advancement. And if you are playing in a mechanism that is levels based with advancement on periodics, and you have to deal with that on every time you advance, the only real option is to convert to the Nykos mechanism, but that would mean you and your group. And there actually is a way to convert the persona from one system to the other. Unfortunately, it's a one-way path. Because of the freedoms that exist in NycosRPG, you can't convert backwards to a D&D character without loss, because you're going to lose a lot of advancement. And so that's just the reality of it. And surprisingly, we made it through our half hour already, and I don't want to make this episode go too much longer. I'm fearful that we've probably already hit the commercial for our viewers. So before we end, I do want to thank both of you for being here today. And before we end, I'm going to give you guys each the floor again for a minute. But the real reason for having this conversation is that we do not think about what that level up looks like. And I think I did a really poor job. I'm probably going to need to redo this video from the standpoint of I didn't do a very good job of clarifying what I think a player goes through. But the concept of the player looking down on the character, he's isolating him from himself. He's looking at it as a playing piece. He's going to modify the numbers, no different than, say, buying an upgraded model. And therefore, now the persona has this set of skills. Maybe that was a new skill that wasn't there before. But no one's taking into consideration what that poor persona has gone through, or why, or what is going through their heads even. We simply just hand wave all of that in order to get our advancement. So, go ahead, Scott.
There is a reason for that. I guarantee you, and maybe I might be wrong, but I guarantee you that most players would get deer in the headlights if you as a game master said, okay, how did you get this skill? They wouldn't be able to, in the moment, explain it like very quickly. Some might, but not all.
Mm-hmm.
And sadly,
But I think my point really wasn't aimed at that. I think my point is actually aimed at the game master. If your players have advances that they intend to incorporate, it's a matter of communication between the game master and the player for those wishes and requests to be granted. So that if a persona says, I want to use rope use, we're going out in the desert, but I want to develop rope use at my next level advancement. Great, you've got 30 feet of lariat. You've been practicing. Build out the story for that. So therefore, when you get that advancement, you'll already have the rope on you, and you can start practicing and using your skill.
yeah.
That's all I'm asking for. I'm saying that we as game masters have fallen into this horrible trap where we just simply hand wave modifications that players make on the field for their characters because we don't want that burden. The irony is that we could completely free ourselves from that burden all the way by switching to a Nykos mechanism where the players in character, in game, have to tell you what they're trying to advance. So therefore it's almost it's like it's weird. It's almost like we're not forcing you to, but we are giving you the opportunity to make that mechanism available to your players in NycosRPG that's not there in regular Dungeons and Dragons because the feats list is nigh unto insurmountable. Does that make sense, Gene? Do you think that works?
Yeah, to suddenly manifest the superior ability at one level instead of like working on it to get it there. I'm working on that skill. I don't have it, but I've been learning it. I have enough to, so I know what I can put my hand on and know I won't kill myself by doing something horrible. And I from there I can build, and then eventually I'll get it up to my base, or I might ramp it up to my base, and there I am. I've learned the skill and take great pride in it. Yay!
Yay.
But that makes it feel good where
Mm-hmm.
you see the skill grow when you use it.
Yeah.
But there is another system that kind of, it doesn't do what Nycos does, but it does something.
What's that?
I mean, Call of Cthulhu does have something like that, but
Well,
it's still kind of arbitrary.
well,
Yeah, well,
And
and then there's God, what is it?
RuneQuest, but
RuneQuest.
which we can also use because they are.
RQ is out
It's
of
base
print.
100 and you can build skills, but I
They're
gotta tell you,
they're out
you
of
have to
print,
have.
ladies and gentlemen. RuneQuest, you can't buy it. It doesn't.
I know, I
So
happen to
so
have a
that's
copy
it's
of it.
unfair to mention ones that they can't get their hands on. Call of
Yeah,
Cthulhu is fair game because they're produced by Chaosium and they are a percentile based system, so there are ways that they are arguably even more compatible with NycosRPG than Dungeons and Dragons is. But the mechanistic differences between them are still substantial. But my point,
Yes.
my real point in this is that the storyteller has to incorporate in their mindset the advancement angles and hold their players to a hotter fire, so to speak, because otherwise the player is actually intentionally divorcing himself from his character and isolating it down onto the tabletop, relegating it to a piece of paper and a model. And I've even heard people in game actually, and I know this will shock you, Gene, but there are actually people that talk about their character in the third person. I know that's a shock to you because you always are speaking in the first person now, but
yeah, I learned.
but
I mean,
there are people who still say, well, my character is going to do this, or I'm going to have the conversation with that guy instead of actually having the conversation.
but okay, John, this all comes down to preference and contrast. I'd argue that if you agree to play a system, you, in a sense, enter. I mean, yes, first person versus third person, that can be universal, but that has to be taught, and it's very hard. Anyway, I'm.
It has to be taught. It has to be experienced. I think that your role play experience has made you an excellent role player, and I can't think of a time when you don't speak of first person when you are in a role play game. So I think that it's not reflective of you that I talk about the third person. I'm talking about individuals who literally don't ever drop into their persona. Instead, they stay above and behind it like they're playing a shooter. you know,
Yeah.
they got their model on the table and they're counting the squares to get to their target, and they are focused only on that aspect of the game, and they're not experiencing the role play of being in the scene.
And I have run for players like that, and it's all I mean is it's still very hard on me as a game master to push a player who's not ready to go first person. That's all I really meant.
You don't immediately just drop into the role of the bartender and ask them the questions directly?
I try to.
That's all you can do.
I try to.
That's all you can do. And I'm not I'm not the guy with the long knives and the pitchforks in the fire trying to burn somebody at the stake for their way of playing. All I'm specifying is that role play in its inception and its concept is first person engagement in the drama of the game. And when you allow them to remain at that third party standoffish, you actually harm yourself and the game experience for both of you. So anyway, like you said, we could go into entire discussion on that as a separate topic. But the mechanism here is
yeah. Some of the thoughts I want to bring to the table.
Go ahead.
Some of the thoughts I have on this do almost require their own episode.
But yeah, the mechanism here is that I'm asking for the game masters to really consider how you handle the player progression, because if you don't take it into account, you're actually hindering your character, your persona's ability, your player's ability to be in a role play environment. What was that, Gene?
Yep. I think he's trying to
talk to somebody else.
Well, figure something out.
Okay. Anyway, we are well past my break time, so we are done with this episode. If you haven't yet, make sure you follow this channel. If you can, subscribe to the Facebook, to the Twitch page, because that gets you free of the commercials. That's it. That's the one thing that I have to say about the Twitch subscription is while it does have a fee, it gives you commercial-free environment for that show. So if you don't like the commercials, that's the way you can get around it right here on Twitch. If, on the other hand, you are watching us on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe there. It really helps the channel to remain a daily channel. And we are on here Mondays through Fridays, 10 o'clock in the morning and 11 p.m. Pacific time, covering roleplay and all of its different flavors. This show's been a little chaotic and whatever, but we did get through the information that I wanted to get to. I do again want to thank Abletop and Miri for being here with us. And any last thoughts from either of you? Gene?
I totally agree about the different games and their progression through life, and eventually somebody got it right, and you did. For me, you got it right, and I enjoy the Nycos system because I can finally make the characters that that I enjoy playing more than just taking up one character and go, God, I really wish I had more languages, or I really wish I could pick up this skill that I can't pick up,
And
you know, and going, why not? I'm human. I mean, or I'm an elf and I'm intelligent, and there's probably nothing I couldn't learn if I take the time to learn it.
Okay, Scott, your turn. Scott, come in, Scott. Abletop, are you with us?
yeah,
Okay,
I'm
did you
still
have,
here.
yeah, did you have any final words? You were we heard you verbalizing, but I wasn't sure what you were saying. And do you have any final words for our audience on character advancement and the mechanisms that the game systems use?
My final word is if you don't like a system's advance, find an find something that works for you as a game master and embrace that.
Cool. Alrighty. Well, thank you again for being here. And like I said, for more information and to join our community, join us at patreon.com/Nykos, Nycos. And we hope to see you soon. Talk to you later, folks.
All right.